So is everyone good? All right. David and Gate, our sole contention regards Chinese fill-in. Yetiv 18 reports that despite claims of U.S. influence being on decline, data reveals American militaristic, economic, and political capability has increased significantly in the past decade in the Persian Gulf. As such, it is the de facto hegemon. Fortunately, Garlic 20 reports in January that Beijing has not yet taken a leading role in military or politics because of the geopolitical dominance of the US within the region. However, if the US were to withdraw from the Persian Gulf, China would fill the vacuum for 3 reasons. The first is to ensure the completion of the Belt and Road Initiative. Hutchinson 19 reports that President Xi Jinping has staked his political career over the success of the BRI. Moreover, Ping 20 reports that the budget of the BRI is an estimated $1.3 trillion. That's why Cohen 19 concludes that in a world in which the US would exit the Gulf, China would fill in to streamline the projects. Second, Kim 18 reports that since Xi Jinping assumed power, he sought to restore China to its historical level of influence. A key component of this stream is the expansion of China's military. As a result, Cohen 19 concludes China is looking to increase its strategic standing in the Gulf in a world without the US. Lastly, Cropsey 19 reports that China wishes to assure its energy supply, which lies within the Middle East. Indeed, Rothkopf 20 explains that China has already been eyeing strategic partnerships with regional actors and a base in Djibouti. For these reasons, Cohen 19 concludes that if the US were to leave the Persian Gulf, China would fill the void. The impact is a US-China war. There are 2 links into war. The first is restricting movement. Lind 18 explains that in areas wherein China is already the dominant actor, it has been building up its military force and intervening in other countries' domestic policies. She concludes that as Chinese power grows, such efforts will only increase. Mearsheimer 14 reports that if China were to project military power into the Gulf, it would cause tensions. China has a vested interest in creating security problems for the US in order to decrease the American military's capability to roam freely into Asia. This would be problematic, as Buzinski 17 explains that Asia, and specifically the South China Sea, have become important to the US because of China's challenge to the US-led liberal rules-based order that America promotes. He furthers that the US wishes to maintain this order. In addition, the Wilson Center 2019 concludes that if China is able to exclusively dominate Asia, the credibility of American security support for allies will be shredded. The second is global hegemony. Amati 20 reports that even in an era of Trump, the US endeavors to preserve its hegemony because of the economic and political advantages it provides. This is problematic, as Yetiv explains that influence is uniquely important in the Middle East as oil drives the world economy. He concludes that what happens in the Persian Gulf is a fulcrum of global dynamics. Indeed, Mearsheimer explains that the US could perceive China's presence and projection of military power as a threat to America's global hegemony. Problematically, Tamino 2 outlines that the risk of major war is greatest when a challenger enters within an approximate parity with the dominant state and is dissatisfied with the existing system. Thus, Mearsheimer 14 concludes that as a result of the security competition, there would be a major risk of war breaking out. Indeed, Gilpin 13 explains that the descending power is incentivized to shore up its power position by demonstrating its strength. He concludes that there has never been a hegemonic power transition which was not accompanied by a great power war. Farley 19 warns that even a conventional war with China would kill millions. Moreover, Talmadge 16 furthers, a war with China would go nuclear, as China could view any ordinary American campaign as a conventional counterforce, a type of attack that stops a nation from being able to use its nuclear arsenal, making China wish to escalate to nuclear war while it still maintained the capability to do so. A nuclear war with China would be catastrophic, as Helfand 13 reports that even a regional nuclear war would collapse global food supply, leading to the death of billions. Even if the US and China don't go to war, a study by Woolforth 2009 concludes that the stability provided by a unipolar world decreases conflict worldwide. It is because international relations are still defined by power politics that we are proud to negate.
I see the cards from the impact that say that China is going to launch a nuke because the US is going to like start an operation that will take out its ability to strike.
Yeah.
And then can I also see the card you read about how, or sorry, like whatever card from your first impact about like restricting movement or like your first war scenario or whatever, about how China is incentivized to like block US presence in the global commons.
So you just want for the second one that China would want to block off US access, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I just sent them.
Cool, thanks. I'll let you know when we get them. And then when Max and I both get them, we'll start prep.
I got. Teddy, do you have it?
Yeah, I just got them here. We'll start prep in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, starting.
Hey, I'm good. Teddy, you good?
Sorry. I was good. Yeah, we used about 15 seconds there. Give me 1 sec.
Just read the normal Flex app, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Is everyone ready? Excellent. Max and I affirm in contention 1 is making love, not war. Our current strategy in the Middle East has the region headed towards calamity. Bolin 19 of Defense 1 explains that the U.S.'s ability to deter Iran in the Gulf is collapsing, as shown by an escalating series of violent actions known to be Iranian. Bolin furthers that even if we manage to restore deterrence, it will provide only temporary respite to the primary source of instability in the Gulf, the security dilemma confronting Saudi Arabia and Iran. U.S. policymakers must address this more fundamental issue, lest the region careen into war. Bolin furthers, finding that security collaboration between Riyadh and Tehran is necessary for the long-term security of the Gulf. However, that kind of security collaboration is impossible as long as the U.S. maintains a military presence in the region. The reason is emboldenment. Watts of Rand explains that U.S. commitments and troop presence make partners more likely to initiate conflict. As allies expect to share the risk and consequences of their actions with a powerful United States, they become more reckless in their foreign policy decisions, making more demands on adversaries, refusing to compromise in disputes, or even initiating conflicts. Luckily, withdrawing our troops can help reduce tensions and foster peace. Tisdale 20 of The Guardian finds that without the Americans to hold their hands and watch their backs, the Saudi royals' behavior could improve significantly. Military adventurism of the type that produced the humanitarian disaster in Yemen would be less likely. Indeed, Luck 20 of the CSM furthers that the Gulf's dramatic Tibet and push for diplomacy with Iran was fueled by what it perceived as the unreliability of the Trump administration, Washington's unwillingness to protect Arab states. Feeling abandoned, Gulf countries concluded that diplomacy was their only way forward with Iran. We must take action as Saudi Arabia started 4 proxy wars in 10 years, displacing and slaughtering tens of millions, while Bolin finds that if the security dilemma between Saudi Arabia and Iran isn't diffused diplomatically, the region will be devastated by war. Contention 2 is Iran war. The probability of a U.S.-Iran war is rapidly increasing as Powell 19 reports hawkish members of the Trump administration are attempting to sidestep Congress and use the AUMF to confront Iran. War looks more certain now than ever. Mudede 20 writes, as of last week, that the U.S. is ratcheting up military installations and preparing for war. And Oliphant 20 furthers, there is a tense naval confrontation literally yesterday. War is uniquely likely now for 3 reasons. First, K20 writes that coronavirus has incentivized both countries to double down, with the U.S. seeking to capitalize on Iran's vulnerability and Iran looking to distract its population from the crisis. Second, Mazzetti 20 explains that U.S. intelligence believes Iran is currently plotting a large-scale attack against U.S. troops in the Middle East. Third, Dreyfus 19 explains that war with Iran could set off an explosion of MAGA-style rally around the flag for Trump. Trump believes this will help him win re-election, as Fernandez 20 writes that Trump predicted Obama would start a war with Iran to get re-elected. Luckily, affirming makes war impossible for two reasons. First, removing the large military presence necessary to go to war. Rogan 19 finds war would specifically require large deployments in the Persian Gulf to engage with Iran's navy and a massive ground deployment in Saudi Arabia, as none of Iran's neighbors would allow American invasion forces access. Second, changing Iran's calculus. Jones 11 explains that surrounding Iran has strengthened hardliners and convinced them that the best path to self-preservation is through violent resistance. However, without American pressure, Fontenrose 20 writes that Iran is willing to negotiate and has even proposed a peace agreement in exchange for American withdrawal. War would be a disaster. Spinelli 19 finds it by necessity would have to involve Iran's regional neighbors and adversaries, destabilizing the whole region for years. Afra Saibi 19 finds that looking for a quick end of the war, Trump would turn to nuclear weapons. Even a small nuclear war would be catastrophic, as Witz 20 writes the use of less than 1% of the world's nukes would trigger nuclear winter, destroying the global food supply and causing extinction. Thus, Max and I are proud to affirm.
All right, I'm ready for cross whenever you are.
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, you have first question.
Okay, so we tell you in that it's not like there's no other hegemon in the region, China fills in. Why do you get access to multilateralism then?
You're saying why aren't these allies emboldened when China's the regional hegemon?
Like, what's the incentive for diplomacy if China's in there intervening militarily? That's not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm really glad you bring this up. Max is going to elaborate on this more in rebuttal, but China has a vested incentive in making sure that these countries don't fight, which is actually why they want to mediate the Yemen war, because every war that happens between Middle Eastern countries threatens the global oil supply. It threatens the stability of the Persian Gulf for shipping lanes. And if China wants to disrupt it, then it doesn't want it disrupted by the Middle Eastern states. It wants to be the disruptor, etc.
Access to mediation because there is the security guarantee of the US. If the security guarantee of the US goes away, China then must become a military hegemon, necessarily meaning that they can't just do diplomatic actions.
Well,
so
no, our point.
Are they just moderating conflict?
The point that I just made is that China as a military hegemon is actually a good thing, because they will try to push nations towards diplomacy because they have an incentive in the region being peaceful. Because you tell me yourself, they want to expand the BRI. Obviously, they don't want wars going on that would disrupt trade, and they want to secure their energy supply. So they wouldn't want the oil, like Saudi oil, to be compromised. Also, by the way, your audio is a little off, just so that you know. Yeah,
yeah. You can hear me talking, but
you're cutting in and out a little, but I can generally get the gist. Can I have a question?
Well, I mean, you just took one kind of. So can I talk?
Well, wait, we've been on this China fill-in stuff for a minute 45. Yeah, okay. So you read these three warrants at the top of your case as to why China wants hegemony in the Persian Gulf. Are those unique to a U.S. withdrawal, or do they happen in either world?
No, they're unique to a U.S. withdrawal because that's the only case in which there's the opportunity for them to go in because of the U.S. But
wait.
All of our links into war are not about why China wants to go to war. It's about the U.S.'s reaction to China going into the region. So the three things that we put at the top of case are just reasons why China would go in absent the U.S. But Cropsey is very specific in that Garlic is very specific in that the reason why China's not in the Gulf right now is because of the United States.
All of your cards, though, are talking about the status quo, right? China wants, but also just, wait, let's just engage with the warranting here. Let me talk. Why would China not want to shore up the BRI, improve its strategic standing and secure its energy supply, even if in the present day?
What Garlic says is that China currently doesn't expand into the Persian Gulf in the interest of those three aims because of the U.S. That's what the evidence says, that the only reason that they're not doing it is because of American presence, but that's cross.
Okay, but the incentives are not unique.
Okay. It's just going to be down their case. Is everybody ready? Great. Time begins now. Start off on their contention one about Saudi emboldenment. Firstly, the argument is completely non-unique because everything in our case tells you that China would just fill in the region. Indeed, Lons 19 reports that because of downplayed US reactions to Iranian attacks, Arab monarchies have already begun looking to China to hedge their bets for militaristic support. This means that the argument is non-unique, but it also serves as a turn, as Rogan 18 reports that if the US were to withdraw support from Saudi Arabia, one, Saudi Arabia would lose all inhibitions about accurate targeting of Houthi formations that US intervention has leveraged, leading to more civilian deaths. And secondly, Saudi Arabia will lose interest in energetic efforts by Washington to reach a ceasefire in Yemen. He concludes that the only reason Saudi Arabia moved towards ceasefires in the past is because of US pressure. But secondly, Farouk 20 reports that the kingdom counts on the United States to combat Iran. But Trump's lukewarm responses to previous escalations and occasional attempts to build good relations with Iran have made it clear that Saudi Arabia can't rely on the United States. Despite this, we still haven't seen Saudi Arabia make attempts to end the conflict. I'll deal with their luck card in a second. But three, it's non-unique, as Saudi Arabia will be emboldened against Iran regardless. As Cycle 20 reports that following years of US sanctions, Iran has been unable to create the technology needed for a state-of-the-art military. As a result, he concludes that most artillery is now obsolete and would struggle to be effective in the field against Saudi Arabia. But four, Knights 18 reports that even if the US were to withdraw or were to cut support from Saudi Arabia, the kingdom still has vast stockpiles of US artillery, allowing them to keep bombing at their current rate, even if future intervention was rejected. But then specifically on their luck card about how Saudi Arabia turned to diplomacy after they lost faith in the United States, two responses. Firstly, if Saudi Arabia doesn't trust Trump's foreign policy, then they wouldn't trust us to begin with, which means that they're not going to be emboldened because they don't have faith in the United States. But B, the Washington Post reports that before Saudi Arabia turned to diplomacy, which is what Luck is talking about, the United States pledged an additional 3,000 troops to Saudi Arabia after Trump said he was going to withdraw, which means that Saudi Arabia still had the US security guarantee, which means you extend Rogan, which says that it was probably the US that leveraged the ceasefire. Go to the second contention about Iran. One, a few general responses at the top. One, turn the arguments as NOAC 20 reports that a US withdrawal is a victory for Iran. As absent US troops, Iran will win the battle of influence as in Iraq, one of their largest regional rivals, allowing them to increase conflict and humanitarian abuse. But two, even if the US withdrew, Iran would still be angered, as Ward 19 reports that Trump's new sanctions, not intervention on Iran in 2019, is forcing them to adopt a more aggressive posture. But three, US presence checks Iran aggression, as Franceman 19 reports that if Iran didn't take the US seriously, as is what would happen if we were to pull out of the region, they would just ramp up conflict. That's important because Brands 19 concludes that the prospects of Middle Eastern troubles impacting America if left unattended is as high as ever. But then four, diplomacy is never going to work as an option, as Rogan 19 finds that because of a lack of interaction, hiding intentions, and religious differences, the diplomacy is always going to be an inherently short-term solution. But then let's go to their specific links. The first one is about COVID, but one, Kasheda 20 reports that because of the chaos bred by coronavirus, Iran is literally on the brink of a coup by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are in no position to start a war because they don't have the political or government unity to do so. But on their second link about US aggression, one, Cycle 20 reports that because of US sanctions, Iran's military has crumbled due to a lack of money. It's a matter of capability versus intent. Even if Iran has the intent to retaliate, they don't have the militaristic capability to do so because United States sanctions have collapsed their economy, which in turn has collapsed their military. They know they can't win a war against Saudi Arabia, let alone the United States. But then on their third link about just Trump being crazy and going in to create a rally around the flag effect. Firstly, Trump already has a rally around the flag effect because of the coronavirus. He has the highest approval rate in office that he's ever had. He's not going to risk that. But secondly, Telmani explains just like a few weeks ago that right now the vast majority of the public doesn't want to go to war with Iran and already blames Trump for increased tensions. He's not going to risk his election prospects. Finally, on nuclear war, they literally give zero warrant for why Trump would turn to nuclear war. They just cite a card. Don't let them add a warrant later. But secondly, we would say that a better warrant is mutually assured destruction, because if it's true that if it's true that their impact is a global nuclear war that collapses food supply, Trump's never going to do it because he knows that he'll be collapsed. Thank you.
Can we see the Rogan card about how diplomacy is fundamentally impossible?
Yeah.
From your overview responses to contention 2? Thanks.
Oh, can we also see Iran's military destroyed?
Yeah.
Thanks.
How much prep has it been?
We're waiting for them to send the evidence.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
I sent it a while ago. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
okay.
I have not gotten it yet, but I will wait.
It was, you wanted that diplomacy won't work and that Iran's military is weak, right?
Yeah. Oh, I just got it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Or wait, I only got one though.
Yeah, well, I sent it separately because it was a while before he said he wanted that Iran's military is weak, but they both say that they were delivered like 4 minutes ago.
Okay. Or here, I got one.
Both, it's fine.
What?
I have both, it's fine.
Okay.
We'll start prep now. Okay. That was 16 seconds. We've only used 16 seconds total, and then we'll keep running like a little bit of prep starting now. Okay. That's another 16 seconds. We've used 30 seconds. The order is going to be my second contention, weighing, and then their case. Or weighing, and then overview, and then their case. The overview is defensive.
Where's the weighing going? Or sorry, where's the overview going?
On their case.
Where do I put the weighing?
Wait, your second contention weighing defensive overview their case?
Yeah.
Can you say that one more time, please?
Our second contention, weighing, and you can flow that wherever. Overview on your case, and then the specific links on your case. Is everyone ready? They dropped the uniqueness evidence from Mudid, who explains that U.S. is ratcheting up military installations and preparing for war right now. First, 3 responses are all about how it's going to be a victory for Iran, but it doesn't engage with our second link, which tells you that the reason why Iran would become less aggressive in a war to which U.S. pulls out is because Afkar 20 explains that hardliners Iran intentionally provoke U.S. military response to garner support. Without the U.S. military, they have no legitimacy. They're undermined. Currently, U.S. military support undermines reformers Iran who want change. That's really important because they just say that Iran's still angry. They're talking about the hardliners, and they say that U.S. presence checks Iran, but this doesn't happen because ultimately Iran is a defensive realist. So if we shift out of the region, then Iran becomes less aggressive. Ultimately, our Fountainhead evidence also says that if we pulled out, then Iran would literally broker a peace deal. Our evidence is just so much better than theirs. This responds to their first 3 responses. Then they say diplomacy doesn't work because it's short term. No, even if diplomacy doesn't work in the long term, we still say it prevents U.S.-Iran war in the status quo, and we say that's really good. Then they say, then on our specific links, our first link is from K, who tells you the coronavirus puts pressures on both countries to start war now. They say, no, Iran is on the brink of a coup. That is the reason they would start the war, according to K, because they want to divert from their domestic problems. Then they say Iran can't win the war, but that's talking about their conventional military. Our Vox evidence specifically says that Iran uses proxies to attack the U.S., and moreover, our Mazzetti evidence says that the U.S. would start a war because intelligence has detected that Iran is not launching a massive attack, which means that the U.S. would strike first. Iran has to be drawn in. Then on our third link about Trump, they say that Trump, it doesn't want to risk his perception right now. He's still losing to Biden by 6 points. He can't win unless he has a rally around the flag effect. He says the public doesn't want to go to war, but our evidence is much more specific to Trump and his perception that if he goes to war with Iran, it's going to cause him to win the election. Their last response is about how we don't warrant why Trump would go nuclear. No, we do warrant that. That's our Afra Saebi evidence, which tells you that Trump would want to end the war before the election. He wanted a quick end to the war, which is why he would launch a nuke. This outweighs their case for 2 reasons. The first one is their nuke war scenario is about mutually assured destruction, and both sides have nukes, so they have an incentive not to launch nukes at each other. Walt Stove explains that there's never been a nuclear war between 2 nuclear powers. The only likely nuclear war is going to be a war in which only one side has nuclear war, i.e. U.S.-Iran war. Moreover, China has submarines, which means they can never be destroyed. Their nuclear deterrent is just undestroyable, so they would never go to war with the U.S. Second, it's much better contextualized. We tell you that U.S.-Iran war is happening in the status quo, and you know that the U.S. and Iran are going to war, whereas they just say, oh, China's rise is going to cause a war at some point. You don't know how this war happens, how many people it affects. And moreover, the U.S. and China both have incentives not to make the war really big because they would go nuclear. Go to their case. Overview. Sami 20 contends that the writing is on the wall. American withdrawal from the Gulf is inevitable for 4 reasons. First is political pressure. COVID-19 writes that the American public is fed up with their endless wars, and Cropsy 19 writes that Trump and Biden both agree on Gulf withdrawal. Second is shifting priorities. Carlin writes that interstate conflicts that directly threaten U.S. interests have been replaced by sub-state threats, and the Gulf oil no longer matters as energy has diversity. Third is Asia. Alterman 19 writes that our Middle East presence is pulling attention, troops, material, and 2 aircraft carriers away from the Asia Pacific. O'Brien 18 further says the Pentagon wants a pivot to Asia. This would happen, which would counter China, which also turns their case, but it's also a reason why withdrawal is inevitable. Fourth is declining trust. Korsman 19 writes that the U.S. has bullied allies over burden sharing and lost their trust, leading to calls in the Gulf for American removal. And Shaji 20 reports that the U.S. and its Gulf allies have irreconcilably different visions for the region. And Alteration 20 explains that the Gulf states are already turned to Russia and China. They lose the round when the first response they agree to our first contention is that China is already filling in the status quo. In fact, Ulrich in 20 articulates that Asian fill-in has been happening for the last decade. But there are 2 reasons why this economic fill-in, which is their 3 links, doesn't go to military power. First, Carlin 19 explains that China and Russia don't want hegemony on the Middle East because they don't want to take on the security commitments the U.S. did. She explains that the U.S. will retain the preponderance and power in the Middle East even after pulling back. Second, Sing 19 writes that if the U.S. left the region, China would disengage militarily because they would no longer need to fight the U.S. for control of the Middle East. Daniels 18 writes that China and Russia use Iran as a lever to balance against the U.S. in the Middle East. So if the U.S. withdrew, it no longer need to use Iran. They could become less aggressive, solid back for Middle Eastern conflict and U.S.-China war.
You kind of cut out for me when you read the evidence on the turn on our case. Could you like either send that or just tell me what it was?
Was it at the end?
What?
The turn on your case, is that the third point of the overview, or is it the last one?
The former.
Okay. I can send you the evidence.
You know what? Send both of the turn evidence, please. Just let me know when you've sent them so we'll know when to start prep.
Okay, I sent it. The first 2 are the first turn, which is the third overview point, and then the other 2 are the last turn.
David, whenever you're ready.
I just got it. That was 8 seconds, but we're going to take some prep before summary.
I have you guys as using 3 minutes and 10 seconds so far.
Oh, I'm at like 2:40, but we can just go to cross them.
Okay. You can ask the first question.
Okay, so what do you think is like a better way to analyze Trump's political calculus? Comments that he made like 8 years ago during the Obama administration, or like the current state of like how much of the US population supports war with Iran?
Trump isn't a very rational person, so I would say he has a very eccentric beliefs of what.
Yeah, it's not like Trump alone decides like if we go to war. Like he has a series of advisors around him that tells him like what is politically viable, what isn't, what are the implications of going to war, what isn't. Like it's not
Yeah,
like
and also our Mudared evidence says that they are already preparing to go to war, so that's what they've decided.
right.
Like,
It says that they're like preparing to go to war with like tensions are being ramped up, right?
yeah,
but,
and
like you can't just like extend that card. Like you have to win your warrants, right? But what I'm saying is that like because of COVID, there's already a rally around the flag effect for Trump, and the
there isn't.
his support right now is at like 46%, which is the highest it's ever been.
Yeah, but he's still losing. He's still down in the polls 6% to Biden. Like at this rate, he's not going to win the election, and the only way that he does win the election is if his base turns out more. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Let's talk about the Saudi emboldenment against Iran thing. So you say that Saudi Arabia can already deter Iran, but then you say that Iran is going to become emboldened if the US act lashes out. So which one is it?
I'm kind of confused by your question. We say that.
So in your third response to our first contention, you say that Saudi Arabia is still going to be emboldened because it has so much more artillery than Iran, or it can already counter Iran. And then on our second contention, you say that, if the US leaves and it's a victory for Iran, Iran's going to be emboldened and then invade other countries. So which one is it?
Right. So one is talking about Saudi-Iranian tensions on the first contention, and then the second one is talking about Iran invading Iraq, right?
Yeah,
so,
but Saudi Arabia doesn't want Iran to invade Iraq, right?
Why?
Because Iraq is a critical buffer state, and Saudi Arabia thinks that it needs to keep its border states.
Sorry, I misspoke.
That's why it started the war in Yemen.
Yeah, well, sorry, I misspoke. It's not like a militaristic invasion. What he says is that Iran would win the battle of influence in Iraq, and then humanitarian abuses and whatnot. So
the impact of this turn is not war, right? So even if we buy your turn, it doesn't lead to war, right?
It's not exactly quantifiable. He says that it will lead to further humanitarian abuses and regional conflict.
So now you said it will lead to war. Which one is it?
No, once Iran has control of influence in Iraq, they have leverage over Iraq, which leads to regional tensions. It's not that Iran literally militaristically invades Iraq.
Okay, so no war.
Can I have a question really quick?
So no war, right? No war happens if Iran gets emboldened.
We'll just call it humanitarian abuse. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
So you read this overview that America is going to withdraw from the Gulf regardless.
Yes.
But in the debate world, isn't it true if you vote neg, that's a permanent action?
If you vote neg, it's a permanent action? No, it's just deciding not to withdraw now. The neg is the status quo, which means that we choose not to fundamentally alter America's policy at this point.
So then, if I was on AF, what would be stopping me from arguing that the United States should just withdraw for 3 days and then come back?
Because that would be a plan. But you would have to argue that the most likely interpretation is that the US withdraws from 3 days and then goes back. And I would say that's very hard to prove. But we proved that the most likely implementation of the status quo is the US withdraws later, which takes out your China impacts, but still prevents or leads to US-Iran war now.
Okay, we'll just contest that that's generally bad for debate. So, you say that the Pentagon pivots to the South China Sea, which checks Chinese expansion, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell me how that happens? Do they put Iranians or Saudi stationed ground troops into naval bases?
Actually, the U.S. only has 500 ground troops in Saudi Arabia. Most of our military presence in the Middle East is naval, including 2 aircraft carriers that could go to the Pacific.
Okay, so then like, what is the feasibility of moving the entirety of the Fifth Fleet, which is like 15% of our like military, to the South China Sea?
I mean, it'd probably take a while, but we'd say that that's what would happen because the Pentagon wants to pivot to Asia, and it's not like the U.S. is going to build new military ships given that the military budget is shrinking. Okay, I think that's crossed.
Okay, so what it's going to look like is it's going to be responding to their overview, and then it's going to be our case, and then it's going to be their case. Is everyone ready?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
It's going to be responding to their overview, and then it's going to be our case, and then it's going to be their case.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Is everyone good? Okay. Start off with their overview about the U.S. withdrawing being inevitable on both sides. First, we'd say fiat power of the affirmation must be durable. This means that the withdrawal can't be reversed later. If we stay in the Gulf, we stay. Our withdrawal isn't conditional. We think you should assume that if you vote neg, the U.S. will permanently stay in the Gulf for 3 reasons. The first is that it protects negation ground. We have no room to argue if the AF can just say that the resolution is undone as soon as any disadvantages come up. If the action can just be reversed, then this harms the educational quality of the round. This kind of argument moves the debate away from the spirit of the resolution, that being whether we should have a large military presence in the Gulf. Then, as a result, drop the debater to set the precedent that these types of arguments are abusive and to punish abusive practices to disincentivize others from running them. But on the specifics of the overview, they say that the US would just pivot to the South China Sea, but recognize that that doesn't prevent Chinese hegemony because Yetiv, our card, says that the Persian Gulf specifically is the fulcrum of global dynamics, meaning that all of our impacts about the US getting mad are still triggered. We'll drop our first link about like restricting movement. Chong of the South China Morning Post reports that Trump is currently looking to withdraw from the South China Sea. On our case specifically, though, the most important piece of evidence comes from like Gallowrick, which says that the only reason that China isn't currently in the region is because of the U.S. They say that China is going in anyway for economic purposes. This didn't engage with our second warrant, which was about the military. Kim said that Xi Jinping wants to expand his military power, which is why they go into the region. Their hegemony isn't just economic. Right now, they don't have any political or military hegemony, so they can't like trigger any of the impacts, but they do as soon as the U.S. leaves. This is problematic because this was our warrant about global hegemony. Amadi said that the U.S. feels threatened militarily and economically, meaning that if they lose military influence because of China, that's when they go to war. Then they say China cares about economic stability, so there won't be fighting. This ignores Lind, which says that even if China starts out with economic or diplomatic incentives, in every case in which they become the hegemon, they expand militarily. Then they say that they won't be fighting the U.S. anymore. That's just economically. Lind is talking about economic expansion. This means that you extend Amadi, which talks about how the U.S. would feel threatened to their hegemony and they want to preserve it, which is why Mearsheimer concludes that the Chinese war is a serious threat. Then extend Farley, which talks about conventional war with China killing millions, and Talmadge saying that if a war begins, then China will eventually go nuclear because it doesn't matter if Trump doesn't want to go to war. This is about the Chinese perception. That's how you get to nuclear war. On their case, they drop a lot of terms about regional stability, the first of which being that if China just fills in, then there's no accountability for Saudi Arabia because they already have stockpiles so they can just use them. But more importantly, on their contention about Iran war. Then, the most important response for you to think about is Ward, which is that Iran will always view the U.S. as an existential threat because of sanctions. This is terminal defense on their hardliners warrant because these hardliners are still going to be triggered because of sanctions. They say that Iran is preparing for war right now. No, they clean concede David's response about coronavirus, saying that like Trump doesn't want to go to war because his approval rating is already at an all-time high. Why would he risk that? On probability, since they didn't contest any of our links, you can be much more confident about a war starting between U.S. and China when all of their harms are like non-unique at best.
Okay, we've used 30 seconds of prep. I'm gonna call Max and we'll start prep when we do that.
Okay, we're starting prep now. Okay, Teddy.
Can beat Peter Pike by reading a no theory
Wait, I thought we were muted.
Oh,
I muted you for you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, we've used all our prep time.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, just give me 1 second to pull up a doc and then we're good. Okay, cool.
Sorry about the not muting thing. I didn't realize we're not.
Wait, so yeah, it's gonna be a little weird. It's gonna be our overview, and I'm gonna like respond to their responses to our overview. Then I will extend case and way, and then I will extend more defense to their case. Sorry if that's like messy. I will try to signpost, okay? Is everyone ready? Yes? Okay, this overview is an easy way to drop them. Max's overview is damning and loses them the round. They never read reasons why a China fill-in now is any worse than it would be when the US inevitably withdraws, and they drop our warrants pretty much, making their argument completely non-unique. Ours isn't, because we read the 3 reasons why a US-Iran war is uniquely probable now. First, Kay writes Trump wants to take advantage of Iran's current weakness and Iran wants to distract its population. Second, Mazzetti writes that intelligence says Iran is planning a large attack that we want to preempt. Mazzetti's dropped. And third, insofar as Trump is losing by 6 to Biden in the RCP average, Dreyfus says he wants a rally around a flag effect, which also frontlines their point about how Trump doesn't want rally around the flag. Now, they say that like this is bad for debate and fiat has to extend it, but we say no. Like, the resolution is about the topic right now, and we say that we know that that's true because of the fact that the NSDA has specified directions for the resolution to stay into effect for 3 past topics, but didn't say that the U.S. withdrawal from the Persian Gulf has to necessarily be indefinite or can't happen in the future. And so we are within the confines of the topic. We are arguing that this is the most likely implementation. And also, by the way, we'd say that their use of theory is a bad model for debate and is probably grounds to drop them because it discourages new debaters from joining like the activity because it provides like an additional hurdle and like tons of new literature that they have to read, which ultimately links it to education because fewer people join the activity. Now, I extended, so war with Iran is imminent. The extremely recent Mudede card says the U.S. is literally preparing as we speak as Trump wants rally around the flag to take advantage of Iran's current weakness and Iran wants to distract its population. Luckily, our first warrant says that Trump needs a Gulf presence to engage with Iran's navy and invade on the ground, so without one war is impossible. And second of all, our second warrant explains Iran only feels threatened by our presence, and Fontenrose writes that they've literally proposed a peace deal
deal if we withdraw. That's crucial because Spinelli explains we're withdrawn and to stabilize the entire region. And Afra Saeedi says that Trump would turn to nukes in hopes of ending it quickly, which Witt says could destroy the global food supply and cause extinction. The only response that they have left is that Iran always sees the U.S. as an existential threat. That's not our conflict scenario. Our evidence is very specific. The Mazzetti card, that Iran provokes a U.S. military response. And we give you structural incentives why Trump wants to escalate with Iran. For example, also in November, there were huge anti-regime protests. The Soleimani strike and then the subsequent escalation distracted from that and helped save the Iranian regime. We say that they'll want to do that again. That's why the tit for tat escalation happens and then Trump brings it up. Okay, why does this outweigh everything else in the round? First of all, because Max says in rebuttal, because of MAD, one nuclear armed state has never attacked another despite fears of hypothetical use it or lose it scenarios. The US striking a non-nuclear Iran is much more probable. Second, our link isn't some nightmare scenario concocted by sensationalist and possibly xenophobic writers. It's happening right now. And third, because the actors in our scenario have actual incentives to do what they're doing. The Afra Saeedi card warranted in case says Trump wants to use nukes to end the war quickly before the election. They never explain why the US will want to take out China's nukes. If anything, we wouldn't, because we wouldn't want to be nuked. That's why Waltz explains the conflict between nuclear states has never progressed beyond proxy wars. Fear of retaliation induces conflict. On the Saudi Arabia turn, it's outweighed by our conflict scenario, never contextualized. Also on their case, they never really do a good job responding to the warrants as to why economic support doesn't necessarily translate into military support. Just because their card says so doesn't mean that Max's actual warrants about how security commitments are burdensome, and also they disengage because they no longer need to fight us, are necessarily taken out.
Okay. You guys ready for cross?
Yep.
Okay, so you say that we should be dropped because theory, which we didn't
Or
read.
you read new theory, or like drop the debater is a form of theory. You say that we set a bad norm and that we should be dropped for it. Novices don't know how to deal with that type of argument.
So let's look at your warranting for why theory is so bad. And you say it's because people have to read way more literature to understand it, which creates a structural barrier. So what advanced literature did we read which you would have needed to read philosophy to respond to?
Okay, well also, okay. I might have misspoken, but the point is that too, it's hard to learn about theory unless you have connections within the debate world, or you go to an expensive camp, and so that creates just structural hurdles for people to join the activity.
Our responses were literally exclusively analytical.
Well, just basically people who aren't educated, who don't have the means to be educated about theory, just can't engage with this pre-fiat layer of the debate and only can engage on substance. And we say that that's bad because when you bamboozle them with these arguments about why people should be dropped for promoting bad norms, then that chills people from participating in the activity.
Could I just speak really quickly because for some reason when your mic is on I can't talk. I want to be very logical about this. We're not this is very simple. We're just saying if you can say the US will go back into the region, or that the policy will be reversed whenever you see any disadvantages, logically speaking, how does Neg win the round? That's just unfair.
How does Neg win the round? By responding to our arguments.
No.
Yeah,
no.
You'd win any round.
No. What we're saying is
on Neg, we have an overview that says that the troops won't leave for 3 reasons. They won't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's competing warrants. You just didn't bother to read any of them.
No, we read them and we also responded to them in summary. But what we're saying is if you can just claim that withdrawal will be reversed the moment that something bad happens, then it's impossible for us to make any arguments.
Not necessarily. No. You have tons of offense. You could have read, let's say, an argument about why withdrawal now uniquely incentivizes nuclearization because in the Trump presidency, allies are unnerved. This isn't necessarily an overview that structurally prefers our side and structurally constrains your ground. And you just arguments to help us.
What is the time frame on this overview then? Because all of these warrants exist regardless. When does it materialize?
In a year or two. A couple months maybe.
Why?
Because we say that these are all trends that are happening right now.
But haven't they been?
So that's just generally what the authors say in our cards.
They say it'll happen in 2 years as of.
Well,
they don't say exactly how it's going to happen, but they do say the writing is on the wall. U.S. Gulf withdrawal is inevitable.
Okay, that's time. Also, yeah.
Also, it doesn't matter when our arguments happen.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
kind of fills in whenever. Teddy, mute yourself.
Oh, sorry. If y'all heard my pen clicks, I apologize.
Okay, it's gonna start off on their overview, and then our case, and then their case. All right. Is everybody ready? Time starts now. Start off on the overview. Liana told you that you shouldn't prefer reversible arguments to protect negation ground because the neg has no room to argue if the AF can just say that the resolution is going to be like undone as soon as their dissat is triggered. That means that you prefer us because they literally undermine the educational quality of the round. The NSDA, like the spirit of the resolution is like whether a US military presence in the Gulf is good or bad. Even if like the NSDA in the small text didn't specify, we would say that like we all understand what the resolution would be. This is like a new, like I'm sure the judges haven't heard this argument before, but even if you don't buy that, we would say that one, we're going to outweigh on clarity because you don't know when this ever materializes. All of their warrants are applicable to the US for like the past 20 years. There's been domestic pressure within the United States. There's been pressure from the Gulf to get the United States out. You have no idea when this terminalizes and there's really low probability. With that being said, you can extend our warrants. The first one that we're going for is that Garlic explains that right now China doesn't go into the Middle East because they're scared of US presence, but once the United States goes out, Cohen explains that they will in order to expand their militarization. At that point, you extend our second warrant about hegemony, which says that Trump really likes hegemony right now, political, economic, and militaristically. However, once the United States, or once China's in the Persian Gulf, which is the fulcrum of global dynamic, that leads to security competition, which then leads to all-out war. They have a few responses. The first one, they're like the only one they extend is that like economic support does not equate to militaristic support, but throughout this entire round, they cold drop Lind, which tells you that right now, China is only using economic policy, but once they're the dominant actor in the region, absent the US, that means that they expand into militaristic policy. That's cold drop. But moreover, even if the United States isn't in the Gulf anymore, what Mearsheimer is talking about is just bipolarity power dynamics, like it still leads to security competition globally. And that leads to proxy wars in the Persian Gulf and in Korea, which then also links into their impacts because it creates regional instability. On their case, we have terminal defense, which comes from Ward, which tells you that like sanctions are an existential threat to Iran, so hardliners are always going to fight and delegitimize. The only thing that they say is that like Iran is just provoking Trump and war happens because of Trump, but they literally don't extend a warrant. In summary, all they say is, quote, it leads to tit for tat, then quote, Trump brings it out, but they don't respond to Helmani, who tells you that right now the public doesn't want to go with war with Iran, so there is no rally around the flag effect. Prefer the status quo over like remarks that were made about Obama 8 years ago. And moreover, we say that COVID already has a rally around the flag effect. It has the highest approval rate he's ever had. Like you don't know how much more it goes up. His advisors know that. Thank you.
All right. So it is going to be the overview first. Iran war, and then I'll weigh it against China. If I have time, I'll extend the defense against their case, but it's not that important. Is everyone ready? All right. They don't give any warrants as to why this like overview thing is non-topical. We said that ultimately, even if the AF has to like have durable DOT, the neg doesn't, because we say that the neg prefers the status quo. And right now, if we have the status quo and we say that status quo the US is pulling out in the future, then ultimately it's not a non-topical argument. Moreover, extend Teddy's response and says the NSDA didn't specify in the resolution how long it has to be, and so it has specified in the resolution before. Finally, like they say they have no ground, but obviously they do have ground. They can just respond to our overview and explain why it's not inevitable. They just didn't want to respond on this argument. Theory is bad, don't drop the debater. If we win this overview, and we do because we win the 3 warrants as to why public support, there's no public support, and like the US is losing interest in the Middle East, the US pulls out inevitably, which means the only difference is pulling out now or later, and we should pull out now to prevent US-Iran war. Go to US-Iran war. They clean dropped throughout the round the Mudarid evidence, which says that the U.S. is preparing for war right now. That wins us the round because regardless of what warrant analysis they make, prefer our warrants because they're empirically true. We said one, coronavirus puts pressure on both nations to go to war. Like, prefer our evidence because it's like historical as well, because Iran used U.S. military provocation to distract from their domestic issues. For instance, with the Soleimani strike, when they provoked a U.S. response, they just say sanctions are an existential threat. But there were huge protests in Iran in November when U.S. sanctions existed. The only difference now is that Iran provoked U.S. military, and now there's a bunch of nationalism, so there is no coup. Then they said that Trump doesn't want MAGA, but he can't win the election right now. He's losing to Biden by 6 points on RCP. So he has to launch a nuclear war. He has to go to war with Iran in order to win the election. This is what he said himself. They dropped the weighing as to why this is more probable than China. One, we say a nuclear war is only possible when only one side has a nuclear weapon. They never warrant out why China and the U.S. wouldn't have mutually assured destruction. They say it themselves in their rebuttal. There's MAD, so it prevents nuclear war. Second, we said that our scenario is much more contextualized because you know that war is happening now and you have to stop it, as opposed to some random regional war with China. Moreover, they never respond to the warrants as to why China doesn't expand militarily in a world without U.S. presence. We say, one, they don't want to take on security commitments, and two, they no longer need to counter U.S. hegemony.
Round, y'all.
Good round, y'all.
So the decision is in. Okay, so I'll just announce the decision. The decision was also congrats for getting here. The decision was a 2-1 for the pro. So congrats to Hunter for advancing. Charlie, do you want to start?
Yeah. So at the end of the round, no one extends an impact. So I'm definitely not going to vote on content, like, at all. But the theoretical argument, so even if I didn't vote on the theoretical argument, I would have presumed to the first speaking team, as it says in my paradigm. So I probably would have voted on that. But I buy that the overview, your response and final focus to the theory is it's durable, and like the argument about how it's not, like, the topic isn't specified. They've preemptively backline this, and also your other responses, if we win the overview, we win it, and then proceed to not extend the overview. So you don't win theory. And I think that they're extending the drop debaters, so they probably win on that. And even if they didn't, I would have probably presumed first, or for the first speaking team.
So to just like comment on the whole theory thing, I don't want to vote for Hunter initially because I really dislike this overview you read. I don't understand why you read it. Like, it's not helping anyone. I think Campbell Hall is making all the right arguments. This is like, I think it's kind of a cop-out to be like, oh, like theory is inaccessible. They're not reading theory. Like, they're literally just making logical arguments that make a lot of sense as to like why your argument is dumb and like why it shouldn't be read. So like, I don't really consider any of that though. Like I like, you guys don't even extend it. So I don't know why we spent so much time on it. That being said, like, I think that I don't think neither team extends like an explicit impact, which Charlie is right about, but like I kind of know that both teams are getting at nuke war of some sort in some scenario. So I look at both link chains. I think the problem is neither team is really like winning their arguments. So for example, on this like Iran US war Trump thing, like your evidence is literally a tweet, which I like Campbell Hall points out. Like I think that's a bad piece of evidence. Also like their evidence about like public perception not wanting a war, I think is also pretty good. I think the problem on Campbell Hall's case is that like the Lin evidence you sent me like doesn't say what I think you guys interpret it as. Like it doesn't say that China's going to expand militaristically. Like all I see is that there's later Mom, sorry. There's there's like the possibility of like expansion of some sort, and it's not very specific. Whereas the evidence that Hunter reads and extends like throughout the round says that like China specifically would not fill in the Middle East because they don't want to take on security guarantees. And they also, I forgot what the other reason was, but the two cards like said what they said they did. And I don't think the Lind evidence necessarily like convinces me of the link. So then after that, I'm like, okay, like if neither team is really winning links, like I'll just like assume that both, like if I were to assume that both teams did win like their impact of nuclear war, I kind of defer to the weighing that's read by Hunter about MAD and how it doesn't really make sense for two nuclear powers to strike each other. It makes more sense for an Iran nuclear war US nuclear war to happen. Like I'm not very happy with this decision. I think that a lot of things happened in this round that didn't need to happen. I think that Hunter moving forward, you should not be reading this overview. It doesn't really help you in any sense. And I think that it does set bad norms, but yeah, that was my end decision.
I guess I have a question for Campbell Hall. Like I didn't understand I guess what you kind of presented as the theory argument. I didn't understand like why you made an issue of the point that like first I didn't get from Hunter that they were sort of only affirming temporarily and that they could then reverse at any time. Like I didn't pick that up, or I didn't think that that was central. And then you guys read theory or seemed to read theory about that, and I didn't understand why you were taking that on, like what difference that made in the debate.
Well, our analysis was basically just that like it wasn't like that like if you vote AF that's reversible. It's just that like the resolution as a whole, like if you vote neg, that should be durable, right? So like the United States should stay in, and if you vote AF, it should stay out. And then our warranting for that, like specifically for neg, like why the United States should stay in, is that if they can just like read an argument that the United States pulls out, but then if they can just read an argument that like the United States will like stay in, but then just like pull out in a few days, or like whenever the time frame is, it like undermines the offense that we have, and it like undermines the spirit of the resolution.
Okay, but did like I may have completely missed it, but was Hunter running that kind of argument? I mean, I didn't feel like they were attacking your case by saying that, like what you were just describing.
Yeah, well, they said that. So what I'm saying is that, like, if you vote for neg, like America should stay in the Gulf indefinitely. Like, but they were saying that even if you vote for the negation, America would still withdraw. So like, even if you say the U.S. stays in the Gulf, they were arguing that, like, they will just withdraw later.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I think instead of like trying to refute that argument kind of on a theoretical argument that it's an argument that they shouldn't have run or shouldn't be allowed, I think it would have been better to attack that directly, to to just contest the idea that the U.S. is already planning to do that. You see what I mean? Okay, so they're saying that the U.S. withdrawal is inevitable. I think you could have said it's not inevitable, and just straight up attacked it on face. And then, I mean, if I were to try to attack that sort of more theoretically, I think I might have said, like, if your interpretation is correct, that the U.S. is going to do this anyway, then, or I would have said, like, the resolution is not about what the US is going to do, but what the US should do, and then argue about what should or should not happen now. Like their argument that it's going to happen or it would inevitably happen is really irrelevant. The question is whether it should happen or should not happen is the crux of the argument in my view. So I think that would have been getting more at the heart of the question. And so that kind of lost you guys some time, and then also it kind of, you know, really sort of took the whole debate in a direction that wasn't that fruitful. Ultimately, I decided on, I don't really like nuclear war scenarios, but both teams ran them. So in the end, I found that the Hunter scenario is a little bit more plausible and believable than the Campbell Hall scenario. I just, you know, I think their one card about the U.S. preparing for war, while I really hope it's not really true, it seemed to be solid evidence, and I didn't really feel there was strong enough pushback on that card. And on the other side, I thought their analysis that nuclear war between two nuclear powers is less likely than a nuclear war where one side has the nukes and the other doesn't. I think that's pretty persuasive too. And just for a lot of reasons, I just don't find, I'm very, very skeptical of any war between the US and China. The two countries, even if they, you know, throw a lot of rhetoric at each other, are so intertwined economically. It just seems like a lot of things would have to go wrong for a war to happen there. While, you know, on the Iran side, you know, literally both sides attacked the other in the last, you know, half a year, last 4 months or so. So I think that the Iran scenario is more plausible and just more persuasive than the China war scenario. So that's why I voted for Hunter.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Best of luck, y'all.
Oh, I have a question
Thanks,
for
appreciate it.
Ellie.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you said we shouldn't run this argument, is it like on a theoretical level, like we shouldn't run this argument because it's bad for debate, or like it doesn't make any sense?
Well, I don't get why you read it. Like when you read it, like you were like, oh, like withdrawal is inevitable, but you don't really like apply it to what it means in this round. So from the get-go, I'm just kind of like, okay, cool. Like what next?
Okay,
And-
yeah.
Oh,
But, like there was an
yeah.
implication at the
The
bottom.
way it's supposed to be implicated, I think Max probably ran out of time in rebuttal, but is that everything in the round becomes non-unique except for the US-Iran war because of the warrants we read as to why it uniquely happens now. Like, do you just think that's not?
Like maybe I'm old, but I think that's abusive, and I don't think it's debate fun for anyone, because then it's like, why are we debating? There's no point of this resolution if everything is non-unique except for your argument, apparently. Like, I don't get the value in that. Like, I think that you are both very smart debaters who could win many rounds without having to read that overview. So like, I guess like from a content perspective and also like theoretical fairness, whatever standard, I don't see the value in reading it.
Yeah, the only way that I see that argument possibly being helpful is when the other side says the US would never withdraw, right? Then you can sort of push back against that idea that it's impossible by saying it's actually maybe even inevitable. But it doesn't seem like Kelly's saying, I don't think it advances your side really.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Right,
Thank you for the
so much.
feedback. Yeah,
Okay.
we appreciate it. Take care.